St Peters Gatekeeper Golden Ale.
And remember, life is too short to be drinking shitty beer.
Welcome to another edition of Bands, Bikes and Booze Reviews. I've got one here today from the St Peters Brewery, and it is their Gatekeeper Golden Ale. And the only reason I picked this up, I've seen this quite a few times in Morrison's, and it's been sat on the shelf. They've had a couple of the other St Peters stuff. I don't know why, but I've seen it there and I've just never picked it up. But I was out and about the other day in Morrison's and I thought, do you know what, I'm going to give that a go. And it's only £1.75. So I thought, well, what have I got to lose with, for £1.75? It's a beer from a pretty decent brewery. I've had quite a few of theirs lately. I've tried the Ruby Ale, the Best Bitter and the Winter Ale, all three really good, and I just thought, well, you know what, I'm going to give this lot a go. And it's a golden ale, which does sound promising going from the ingredients. But it's from the St Peters Brewery, and if you've seen my videos before, you'll know the history of the brewery. They haven't been going that long. 96, well, I'm saying not long. It's over sort of 20 years. It's getting on 30 years now, and it's one of them breweries that, even though they're quite new, the stuff that they brew does taste very traditional, and they're pretty good at what they do. I have to say, I've got no real complaints about any of the beers they do, to be honest. I can't remember one or tasting one that I thought was really bad. And they've got a pretty unique bottle here, which is based on an old gin bottle that was discovered in Philadelphia from the 1800s, so there's that as well. So that's another selling point, is the bottle. To be honest, I don't give a fuck about bottles and all that. It's all about the beer and what it tastes like. They've got a pretty good outlook on how beer should be brewed, and they come from a region of Britain which has got some really good breweries. Now they're from Suffolk, from a place called South Elam, which is not too far from the Green King Brewery. Now you can take or leave Green King. They do the odd one or two that are reasonably good, but to be honest, they're not my favourite brewery. But they are also not too far away from the Adnams Brewery. Now, Adnams for me are one of the best brewers in Britain. If you don't like Adnams beer, I'd genuinely question your credentials on beer. But I'd also be intrigued to know why you don't like it, because, to be honest, I think they get almost everything right. They're up there, for me, with Shepherd Neame. They're up there with Fuller's, the good British brewers. No complaints about them whatsoever. Same, they're up there with Theakston's too, in my opinion. And they use locally sourced ingredients, so that is another plus for me for this brewery. I've been in their pubs before. I've tried the stuff on cask. There's a pub in London. I've gone on about it in the other videos if you want to know about it. But there's a pub called the Jerusalem. Really nice pub. Little pub tucked away in a place called Clerkenwell, which is a really good place for drinking. If you're ever in London and you fancy a beer, I suggest you get yourself down to Clerkenwell. It's got the history and it's got the pubs. It's well worth it. But they've got one of their pubs there, and that is really good. They do have a lot of the stuff on cask, and it's really nice, but what you see is what you get. Once it's sold out, it's gone. That is it. So it could be really annoying if you want a decent pint. It's happened to me a couple of times. Been down there, been drinking some really nice stuff, usually the Ruby Ale. Had one or two pints, go back to get a third. Sorry mate, it's off, you got to pick something else. And and then ad nauseum for the rest. But anyway, let's stop gashing about my beer drinking woes. Let's get this investigated. Right, 500ml bottle, 4.7%. It is a golden ale, light caramel aromas with late bitterness. It contains locally sourced East Anglian malt, which, if that's what Adnams are using and Green King are using, it's not bad stuff. If you've ever been to Suffolk, you'll know that's a very, very rural place. There's lots of jokes about them. I'm not going to go into them here. There's lots of jokes about Norfolk, which is the bordering county. Again, another very rural place. I'm not going to go into that either. I've done it in other videos, and yeah, it doesn't really need to be done. But they also use Challenger hops in this, and they use Goldings as well. So again, that is a very two traditional British hops. The Goldings, of course, are a big thing in Kent. These are obviously grown up near theirs, so you know there's going to be differences, very slight differences. You probably won't even taste it in there. But it's also got Challenger hops in there as well. Now, Challenger is a very interesting hop. I've tasted beers that have only used Challenger, and they're very good bittering hops, but they also give some very nice flavours as well. But knowing St Peters, if they've got them two hops in there, this is going to be a good one, and I'm quite looking forward to it. So let's stop gassing. Let's get this open. Okay. Now the beer fridge is running very bare at the moment, and I've only got a couple more and a few craft beers in there. I've put in an order with Noble Green. They're really slow on that, and it's really fucking annoying me. I put it in at the start of the week. It's Friday now. No word from them since, and it cost me a tenner. They've got very expensive. I wouldn't say very expensive. That's an exaggeration, but they've got comparatively more expensive postage costs than, say, Beers of Europe or some of the other bottle shops, which is annoying because I pay over the odds and it still hasn't fucking turned up. But there you go, rant over. There's the cap. It is a raven, which is homage, or not homage, but it's signifying the fact that Suffolk was inhabited by the Vikings during well, they call them the Dark Ages, but it was inhabited by them. Where I come from, London, that wasn't inhabited by the Vikings. King Alfred said, on your fucking bike, you blonde-haired bastards. You ain't coming to London. Because that's where all the best beer was. So they went to Yorkshire instead. Oh dear. Give it a rest with Yorkshire. Let's get it in the glass. Right, what are we getting on the nose? I'm going to let that calm down a bit, because there's some slightly dodgy notes coming from that. Interesting. A little bit of caramel. There's some bitterness on there as well, some hoppy, herbal bitterness. Grassy notes, like bitter grass. Interesting. Let's get the rest of it in the glass, see what's going on. Now, it's a golden ale. It's probably not the best time of year to be drinking golden ale, but it is December now. Cold out there. There it is in the glass. Very clear. Very, very little carbonation in that, despite the size of the head. Okay, well, let's get it down the hatch and see what's going on. Bottoms up. Postman's bin. Yeah, not bad. Quite a few flavours coming from that. Let's go on again. Oh, there's a bitterness on the back end, and that's coming from them Challenger hops. Earthy, peppery bitterness. That's definitely a Challenger, and I'm pretty sure they've done that to give it that bitterness on the arse end of it. But in between that, what are we getting? The finish is like a biscuit malt bitterness, if you can imagine that. God, it really is. It has got, they say there's late bitterness on this. Yeah, like caramel aromas with a late bitterness. Yeah, you do get that real bitter finish on this, which I quite like. Not used to it in a golden ale, I have to say. Not this bitter anyway. There tends to be a little bit more sweetness on a golden ale from the United Kingdom, and this is sort of bucking the trend a little bit. That is quite hoppy, and it is bitter, almost to the point of an astringent bitterness. But it's not bad. It's just going as near the threshold of that bitterness just before it becomes astringent and not nice and cheap tasting. And it is not bad at all. It's, God, there's even more of them. You can really get them hops on there now. It's not the best golden ale I've tasted, I have to say that. But it's certainly not the worst. It is not bad at all. Here's a thing for you. I was looking up the price. I couldn't remember the price, so I looked up the price on the Morrison's website, and people can put reviews underneath. And I just happened to sort of glance, and I looked, and somebody had put, "This beer's a bit too sweet for me." And I just thought, what the fuck are you drinking if this is too sweet? You must be drinking fucking vinegar, because this has got a real bitter finish on it, which is unusual. So I don't normally associate as bitter a finish with a blonde, but it isn't bad, I have to say. It's not the worst golden ale I've tried. I don't think it's the best though, but it's okay. It's pretty drinkable. I'm not sure I'll buy it again. It's definitely not lacking character. As soon as I put that up to my nose, it's just grassy, herbal bitterness that's coming out from there. And there is a sweet caramel malt on the palate. Little touch of vanilla, not much, like creamy style vanilla. But it isn't bad. It's not bad at all. So what's the verdict on St Peters Gatekeeper Golden Ale? Yeah, it's not bad, and for £1.75, you're not really going to go wrong with this. Now, I've just taken this out of the fridge, and I would say it's reasonably cold, but it's got a bitterness to the finish. I know I keep going on about it, but it's got a bitterness to the finish that I wouldn't normally associate with a blonde ale. I'd expect it to be a little bit sweeter. Now, I don't know whether this is due to the fact that my palate has been adjusted to drinking German and Belgian winter beers, and this has come as a bit of a shock because it's a British beer with British hops, which are renowned for their sort of bitterness and earthiness as well. But I have to say, it's okay. It's not the best golden ale I've tried. There's better out there, certainly, and this it doesn't really stay up there with the best of them. Do you know what I mean? There's some really good golden ales out there, and this one just just doesn't really do much for me in comparison to them ones. So I'm going to give it a 6.5 out of 10. And that sounds a little bit harsh, but it's a solid 6.5 out of 10. But I can't quite give it a 7 because I've tasted better. Now I must admit, Golden Ale, British Golden Ale or UK Golden Ale is not my favourite style of beer. If there's a choice of, in the summer drinking a light top fermented beer, I'd much rather go for the Fuller's stuff, the Honeydew, which is it's a Golden Ale but with some honey in it. Maybe that's what it is. I prefer the slightly sweeter beer to the bitter beer, but I'm not minding this at all. It's just there is better out there. So I'm going to give it 6.5 out of 10. It's £1.75. If you like Golden Ales with a bitter finish, you're going to like this. And I think 6.5 is a fair mark for that. So yeah, there you go. And remember, beer is working class champagne.